Reed, are you supposed to trap that turtle with your soccer net? No, you're not. Put that net back in the yard. 1, 2. Hurry up. Monday, May 15th. I've already changed the oil in my truck, greased the drive shaft and lower ball joints, rotated the tires. And now that I'm sweltering hot and sweating, it's time to go work bees. So it may still be spring, I don't know, but it's summer. Gosh, it's so humid out. It's gonna be in the mid 80s today and humid. I've got 8 queens, virgins, in the incubator in the truck here beside me, and they are called, let's see, the mother is Caucasian, inseminated with Carniolan drones, and that's the grandmother, and then I believe the mothers were open mated, so they've got a little more Caucasian in them than they do Carniolan. And I'm going to breed these virgins into my stock. They're going to open mate with my Italian, Russian, feral Tennessee survivor bee population, and I'm going to see what I get from it. It'll be interesting, really interesting. Shabu Raj at Two Rivers Honeybees, he's near Columbia, Tennessee. He's the one I got these queens from. Bob Benny's done a video with him on artificial insemination. He does a good job with it. He's kind of like me. He dives into the deep end on things, so it's neat. Hope you can hear me past the truck noise here. I've got to leave that running because I need the air conditioner on so the queens don't get too hot. But I think I'm gonna pick on this one. We'll see if she's got anything in there I can steal. The tall ones are making honey. I don't want to split them up. This one I split 2 days ago. I don't know if they'll have anything left. I split that one a couple days ago. This hive here was 6 boxes high. I split it 6 ways from Sunday. I split this one already. I feel like I'm picking on these bees. I really do, but I need 8 splits. That hive right there is gonna make honey. That's a double medium with an excluder. They're gonna make honey. We got a little VSH nuke going on down there at the end. I don't want to pick on them, so I really don't know who to pick on here. Maybe I'll split the splits I've already split. It's that time of year. I gotta get colonies made. Mountain laurel is blooming on the river bluff. I could do without that. So that is some of the worst tasting honey I've had. It's astringent, I guess is the word. It's got this medicinal astringent flavor. So I'm gonna put some foundation on them and see if I can keep most of that out of my supers. Luckily the supers are mostly full of good stuff. It's just gonna be the outer frames, but I'll have to mark these and taste test them in the honey house before I mix it in with my regular honey. Something you gotta watch out for, unfortunately. I forgot about this swarm trap last year and left it up in the tree. And I said I wasn't gonna put any out this year because I'm so busy splitting for my own bees and stuff. But I did come out here and spray lemongrass on this one a couple times with the kids. It's real close to my house and we've caught bees. More bees. That's 10 medium frames in a deep box. So I don't know. I don't have any idea how long they've been in there. I haven't checked the swarm trap in 3 or 4 weeks, probably. It may turn into a cutout. It won't be that bad though. It'll just be a lot of comb hanging on the bottom of the frames. I'll try to get them moved here pretty quick. Hopefully they swarm like last weekend when I saw some other swarms and they haven't been in there that long. It won't be too bad. I got to get them moved though pretty quick or it'll become a problem. That box will only get heavier and it's up. Just after daybreak, the sun's not up yet. Trying to get these swarms locked up before they get active this morning. Got coffee in the truck, but it's not in me yet. Got 4 swarms loaded and 1 more to go pick up. A couple of them had bees flying already. It's early, 5:45. I think I've got time to go get the last one before wife and kids get up. I'm usually the breakfast cooker in the morning because I'm apparently not qualified to pick out clothes for the children that match. So I cook breakfast. That's harder to mess up. Creative comb makers. That's why I don't prefer the Man Lake plastic frames and foundation. They're cross combing in there, they don't draw it straight. That's frustrating. There's the queen. Right there. So we'll get her in here, safe and sound. That's a lot of bees. Goodness. They got this whole top box nearly drawn out. That is one heck of a swarm. So this is interesting, and not in a good way. People have told me for years that if I give a swarm a frame of open brood, then they won't leave the box. That'll lock them into the box. So I did that with 4 swarms, and 2 of them absconded. 2 of them. This one is trying to raise emergency cells to replace the queen that they don't have. That's something. So if I catch a swarm in a box, I've caught a bunch of them like that, I always feed them the same day that I catch them. I get sugar syrup into them and feed them. And this year I was trying to take the easier route, the more time efficient route, and just give them a frame of open brood, thinking that that would also lock them in the box. If I feed a swarm the same day I get them in the box, I've never had one abscond. And using this method, I had 2 of 4 abscond. They will leave open brood. They will. So I may not have been clear on what happened in this one, but some of the bees came in and covered the brood and they wouldn't leave, but the swarm moved into the box. I watched them move into the box, but the swarm left and just left this 1 or 1.5 frames of bees on this brood. And they're now queenless and trying to raise an emergency queen. So I'll give them a week and see what happens. See if any of those emerge. If not, I'll just combine them. As a rule, I don't like emergency queens. This swarm here is in really good shape. This one is huge. They're really growing. This one's small. That one's probably average, it's doing okay. That's disappointing. That's disappointing for an early morning's work. These are some of my VSH virgins I got from Corey Stevens. I made these nukes up and introduced the queens about 4 weeks ago, and it'll hit 5 weeks next week. It takes 10 days to 2 weeks for the queen to get back and to really start laying. And then it takes 3 weeks for them to get an emergence of brood from that queen. So I'm expecting these hives to explode in population next week because they should be going through their first emergence. So all I'm gonna do today is go through and give each of them a gallon of syrup and then put a second box on top, and then I don't have to look at them for a week. And I'll probably give them another gallon of syrup next week because I need them to grow. I'd like them to make drones this year so that I can mate to these queens with some of my summer queens I'm gonna make. This little nuke may already be going through an emergence. They need a box like last week. This is what happens when you have inner covers with a rim that is not tall enough. If you make this rim a 1/2 inch, you will never have ants up here. Now this rim is probably 3/8, which is bee space, but this Luon, maybe you can tell has bowed. So you've actually got more space under it, above the top bars than you're supposed to, and that means that you've got less space between this and the top lid. And that's why I've got thousands of sugar ants up here. And I'm gonna have comb on top of the top bars because this lid is no good. So that's what I expected on this lid. I've got a bunch of comb on top of the top bars and ants above it. Because it's cheap. Made cheap, not right. This is what I much prefer. I actually took a 1/4 inch strip. I actually milled down some 2x4s, ripped them, and cut it down to a 1/4 inch and stapled that on top to give this, I think it's a 1/2 inch rim, it may be 5/8, looks like a half. And I get no ants up here. I got some right there, but the bees can't get to that. But the ants cannot invade the top of the inner cover because I've got bees up here. I want bees up here. If the bees can't get up here, the ants will. There is another solution. I replaced this one that had all the ants in it with a migratory lid I had in the truck. I like migratory lids. It's simpler, it's cheaper, less equipment overall, but I do get more condensation with them. And here in Tennessee, we're so wet in the winter that I really prefer overwintering with a telescopic lid with an inner cover with this rim. It's more work. I've got to make those, or I've got to add to them, but I think it's worth it. Things continue to bloom out of order. Elderberry is way early. Way early. Hey guys, Nathan at Duck River Honey. This is my 15th vlog on building a bee business. This has been a busy week. It's been a pretty good weather week. I'll tell you where we're at in the flow, in our nectar flow. Black locust is done. I would say that it was well below average in nectar production. Tulip poplar, you still see some blooming, but most of them are done. And I would say that it was below average in nectar production. And that's not good because those are our two major flows. We make most of our honey in late April to early, middle of May or so. And then right now, American Holly is done. That can be a pretty good flow. Bees love it. It's a good nectar producer, but it got washed out. We had two huge monsoon rains, and that American Holly only blooms for about 5 to 7 days. And we had two huge rains during that time frame, which washes the nectar out of those tiny little flowers. And I mean, the bees just didn't get a chance to work it but like 3 days or something. And so I've seen mountain laurel creeping into my honey supers in 1 yard this week. That is no good. I'm gonna have to take some painter's tape and tape around those boxes and be real careful of that in the honey house. It's not in, I don't have solid boxes of it, but some of the exterior frames have got some in it, and that's just no good. It's a terrible tasting honey. The flavor, if I had to describe the flavor, if you're from the South and you've ever eaten a green persimmon, well, stick a green persimmon in your mouth and chew on it, and then take a shot of iodine at the same time. And that's the flavor of mountain laurel honey. It's astringent. It's got this heavy medicinal flavor. Makes your mouth want to pucker. It's just terrible. Absolutely terrible. So you get something that bad mixed into good honey, and even a little bit of it, you can taste it in there. So I'll have to be really careful to not get that in any of my end product. And it's fine for bee feed. It's no good for people. So I'll use it for something. I'll use it to bulk up nukes for winter and stuff like that. Swap frames around, equalize honey frames into nukes in midsummer. So it will go to use, but it cannot be used for anything for human consumption. So the next thing that we've got blooming right now is persimmon, and since persimmon is going, catalpa will also be blooming. They usually bloom together. Things are a little bit odd this year. I've seen American black elderberry blooming, and that's usually in June and July that I see that, and we're in mid-May, and elderberry is already blooming. It's just odd. But I have seen one catalpa in bloom already, and persimmons are going. Those are generally pretty minor flows. The bees will work them, but I don't see, honey supers fill up, or I don't see foundations get drawn off of that flow. Last year was an exception to that. We did make some persimmon honey last year. I got foundations drawn and made boxes of persimmon honey. So I'm not expecting that this year. When you have a species that produces irregularly, it usually doesn't produce good 2 years in a row. So I'm really not expecting much on the nectar flow front unless Dutch white clover comes in hard. We really need sun and temperatures in the mid-80s to get that going. And that's usually not a real good flow for me anyway. We've got the wrong kind of soil for good nectar production in Dutch white. So really my next big hope on nectar production would be sumac and sourwood in June. I'll be watching those pretty close, and if it looks like it's going to be a good year, I may actually move some hives around to some different out yards to try to capitalize on that. We'll just have to see. So I also got my second round of nukes transferred into a hive this week. I put that in quotations because, if you're running deep equipment, a 5-frame nuke, you have to transfer that into a deep box, a 10-frame deep box, when they get big enough. Well, I'm running all medium equipment, so I've got 8 medium frames with a double frame feeder. So all I did was fill their frame feeder up with a gallon of syrup and set a 10 frame box on top of it. And they've got 2 mediums now. And when they get built up a little bit into that second box, then I will take the feeder and put it in the top and put drawn frames down in the bottom. So I've got a totally drawn box down in the bottom, and then I can just keep working up from there. So I think in another 2 or 3 weeks, the first round of nukes that I made would be ready to split again. So in the next several days, I'm gonna take preliminary steps to set up another cell builder and get another round of grafts going. That's something I need to keep at. I need to get my numbers up a little bit more before we get into the end of the honey flow. I went around and took an inventory on hives and boxes and honey and all this stuff this week. I'll give you a quick rundown. Pretty conservatively, I think I've got about 2,000 pounds on hives right now, 2,000 pounds of honey. That would be net weight. And we've got some flow to go. I need to pick up more than that. I'm down to about 30 production colonies. I came into spring with 40 or 41, and I haven't had any die or anything like that. It's just I've have been culling hives out that didn't look productive, looked like they had a failing queen, or they weren't growing like they should, or whatever, and broke a lot of them up completely into nukes. And that's where I've taken about a quarter to a third of my operation and turned it into nukes, and then I've made more nukes from production colonies, and I've actually split my early splits already. So with everything, I think I'm at about 115 colonies right now. And I've got several of those waiting to get queens mated and returned. So I think with my percentage on return queens, I think I'll be over 100 hives. It'll be close to that, 100, 105. I'm expecting 105 if I get an 80% mating success on this latest round of splits that I made. So, pretty conservatively, I think I'm going to be over 100 colonies. And I think maybe the first 100 is the hardest. It's been a lot of work to get to this point so far. And, from where I'm at now, I really want to at least go to 150. I want to go to winter with at least 150 colonies. And then coming into next year, I should be in a pretty good position. I should dramatically increase honey production where I'm got a viable, sustainable business at that point, and be able to split and get my numbers up to where they need to be a viable long-term business, which I think is probably going to be 250, 300 colonies, somewhere in that range. Talking with Bob, I quoted R.O.B. Manley's honey farming book from the 1940s, and he had said that you need at least 200 colonies to be a full-time beekeeper, and Bob agreed with that. He said at least 200. So I'm thinking 250, 300 is probably going to be a minimum viable size for me. So got a plan to get there. It's a lot of work and a lot of infrastructure trying to build everything all at the same time, but it's coming along pretty well so far. So if we get a good sourwood sumac flow, I think I really target about 100 pounds per colony for honey production. That's what I'm hoping for. And like I said, I've got about 30 colonies right now. So if I can get 3,000 pounds this year with everything that's going on, I think that would be, I wouldn't be happy with that. I would be happy with 4,000, but if I could get 3,000, I think that's reasonable. It can always be more, but it can also be less. So I'm hoping for a good sumac sourwood flow. Maybe persimmon or catalpa or something else that I don't know about will kick off and be good this spring. But we generally have a lull after the tulip poplar and black locust, and then before sumac sourwood kick in, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It may be a trickle from here to the dearth. I don't know. You know, maybe what I've got is what I've got. I hope not, but we'll see. So the only thing that I think I can do to increase my honey production right now would be to go ahead and start harvesting and extracting, and then putting wet empty supers back on hives. And then even if you've got a little trickle of a flow, the bees will still store that trickle if they've got drawn comb. But a lot of times they won't draw foundations on a trickle. You know, they'll put that in the brood nest or they'll eat it or whatever. But if you've got drawn comb, you can give them, they'll fill it up, even on a light flow. So I would love to be able to go ahead and do that, start pulling some supers in and extracting them and getting them back on hives, but I'm hanging paneling in my honey house right now. So that's not gonna get done until I can get my honey house buttoned up and trimmed, and gosh, I've got to take the plumbing apart and cut holes, and it's going to be such a pain getting those panels put in around all the plumbing. It's actually going pretty good on the electric. I made a template to go over the ceiling boxes, and I'm using a Roto-Zip to cut out the outlets. I got a blind mark thing that plugs into the outlet boxes so I can put the panel up over the outlets. And then it's got this magnetic box that clicks onto it, and I just draw around and cut out with a Roto-Zip. And that's working really good, I figured out how to get my ceiling panels hung in there. I made a little platform out of 2x4s with a drop leg on one side to allow me by myself to get it up, and then put the panels in on top of it. It takes the place of a drywall jack, which I don't have, and I don't want to pay $50 a day to rent since I'm doing this some at a time. Another thing going on is my kids are out of school for the summer, so I've got lots of help. I went into my storage container today. They were over at the honey house with me while I was working, and they were both up on top of the top set of shelves that I had built. I was hearing stuff fall in there, and they get into everything. They're worse than I was when I was a kid, I think. And I was pretty bad. I got into stuff I shouldn't have when I was a kid. So Q&A this week, I've got a question that was emailed to me from Jerry Price. He says, I'm curious how you get comb drawn. You got a lot drawn last year and still made a lot of honey. I'd love to see a video on how you did that. I don't know that I'm going to make a video on that because it's pretty simple. Bees turn carbohydrates into wax. If they've got plenty of food stored and you're on a nectar flow, a good strong nectar flow, they're gonna make wax or they're gonna swarm. If you put boxes of foundation on top of them in a good flow, they're gonna fill it out. If you don't give them space on a good flow, they'll plug out and then try to swarm. So all I did last year is the same thing I did this year. Control swarming until I get to the flow, then give them all of the drawn comb that I've got, let them fill that up, and then start them in on boxes of foundation. I always pull one at least partially drawn frame up into a 10 frame box of foundation. That baits the bees to get them up. And another thing is bees don't draw foundations through an excluder for me as well as they do if you're not using an excluder. So that's really, it. Now that's drawing on a honey flow. My nukes are drawing on sugar syrup plus a honey flow. I am basically free feeding those right now, giving them plenty of space. I want them to have no lack of food because I'm splitting out of them and giving them foundations back to draw new foundations, and giving them new boxes to draw, and they're building their hives out. You can cause swarming by doing that, just constantly feeding nukes. You can cause swarming, but if you're pulling them back and they're drawing wax, It can still be risky as these nukes get bigger to keep feeding them, so that's something I'll have to watch. And I feel like I've got a much better feel for that than I have in the past, because I have fed swarms that I caught until they swarmed again. You know, 2 or 3 years ago, I had a bunch of swarms that I caught, and I just kept feeding them, and they swarmed again. But I think I've got a pretty good feel for that at this point. So it's all about, you know, incoming carbohydrates. You got to have nectar or supply sugar syrup to get foundations drawn. So Jerry, I really don't think that's anything special that I've done. You know, last year we had a pretty decent nectar flow. I got some foundations drawn. I made a honey crop. This year we're having, I'd say this year's not as good so far as last year was. And I'm getting some foundations drawn, but not like they were last year. And that's just, you know, that's just how it is. Now, another thing that I can do is when I pull my honey crop off in, say, July, because we go into a dearth at that point, I've still got a ton of bees. I've got bees that are used to making wax. And I think once bees get used to making wax, it's easier to keep them making wax than it is to convince them to start making wax. So one thing that I very well may do is take my big colonies and strip them down to the 3 mediums, which is a double deep height, give them a box of foundation and feed them pretty hard, and try to get them to draw out, you know, another box. I may actually go in and split my hives down to 2 boxes and then give them a 3rd box back and try to get them to draw it out and put them into winter that way. That seems like it would be a pretty reasonable thing for me to do, and I think I could get them into good shape for winter and make that late increase that I'm really looking for. I really want a battery of nukes that I can keep pretty small and winter over double screen boards on top of big colonies. And I think that would be a good opportunity for me to accomplish several things. Get some more foundations drawn on sugar syrup, get hives into good shape, take excess strength after the honey flow, turn it into splits, and then have a nuke battery that can overwinter in pretty small colonies all at the same time. So that's sort of what I'm thinking at that time, to get some more foundations drawn and, you know, set myself up for winter. So channel news, this is going to be my only video this weekend, I think. I've got some stuff I could post, but it needs work, and I've just been so busy. I've got to get this honey house finished up. I need to be using it, so I've got to focus on that. I've still am getting through all of my colonies every week, you know, just trying to keep a tight watch on them. You know, when I was talking to Bob Benny about building a full-time bee business, I asked him about economies of scale and whether gross revenue per colony would be higher for someone with 100 hives or 50 hives, or if it would be higher for someone with 500 hives. And he thought that gross revenue per colony would be higher was for somebody who had fewer hives. And that's because they can take better care of them. They've got more time to invest in each colony. So I've kind of taken that to heart this year. I'm trying to micromanage my colonies because I don't have that many yet. And I want them all to be in really good shape and, you know, make as much honey as they can make, grow as much as they can grow, so that I can split them. You know, I'm trying to do a good job on that, so I'm still getting through all of my colonies in a couple days a week, and then that leaves me the rest of the week to do other work. So I think I'm going to continue doing that for a while, and that's not going to leave me a whole lot of time for extra videos. So that's just where I am in the season. Guys, if you've got any questions, I need questions for my QA every week, so you can send those to info@duckriverhoney.com. You can also just leave them in the comments below, and I'll tag those and save them and use them. So if you got any questions, please ask. Guys, I appreciate you watching. I'll see you on the next one. Number 15. I did that without notes or anything. I'm like crawling across the finish line here.